This one just came up on my feed when I was looking for music from around the world. And I listened to a little bit and I was like, holy moly, I want to react to this. The choir is not going to be quite like this, the virtual choir, a bit less solemn. So haunting. I love this drone that they have going underneath and how they're doing that. There are multiple layers. You've got a bunch of basses there, a bunch of sopranos, a bunch of mezzos, and they are all breathing at different times. They're staggering their breath so that it sounds like one consistent drone and you don't hear when someone starts and the next person ends, because no one can actually hold a note that long. You can hear that really rich, grounded tone that they are not forcing it. They're kind of channeling it, and it's kind of interesting because I'm not a religious person at all, but if you allow the sound rather than push, then you end up with this gorgeous, yummy sound. And whether or not you're a person that believes in that connection to the spiritual, they are using that feeling of connection to produce the most beautiful, resonant, relaxed, reverent vocal tone. And this doesn't have to be a connection to a specific god. It can be nature. It can be just a feeling of gratefulness and how that manifests in your body. Because when you feel really grateful, how does your physiology respond? That is what you want for singing. Let's zone in. His spoken word is so emotional as well. He's allowing in the spoken word his voice to break a bit, so it sounds like it's quite emotional. I'm doing it in a fake way. I'm pretty sure he's probably absolutely feeling the emotions of that moment. The vocals underneath are so smooth. It's a sort of vocals that you could put in a really echoey church and they work really well because that echo and reverb adds more to it. You don't want it to be too short and sharp because that can get lost in the big echoey church. What's really nice as well is you've got this drone note, so your ear can also always come back to that and you can improvise over the top. I'm not sure if these are learned phrases or improvised phrases, but when you have a scale in your head that you can follow, then you can basically pick any note from that scale and run up and down it, jump around it, and use that as the improvisational bones. Improvisation doesn't just come from nowhere. It comes from a knowledge of the scales and a knowledge of how music flows and moves. And you can then use that knowledge as a map. I think they're wearing different colours for the different vocal parts.
Oh
those dynamics are so effective. All that happened there was that drone note swelled, and what's really tricky with that is that it can be easy to go kind of flat and sharp. His vocals, that resonance, again, it's all about the breath support being really, really relaxed and open, and a really clear line, so you're not doing metal singing, your false vocal folds are way out of the way, and you're creating a clear line for that breath, and your vocal cords can then vibrate really, really efficiently. It's also partially down to just the shape of his resonance spaces and the tone that creates. We all have our individual resonance space and then our own individual tone. Then I loved how they just moved the female voices into that little clashy note that then resolved, so you get that feeling of dis-ease and then resolve. Clash, resolve. I love how he's using his hand. He wants more from the backing so that he can sing upon it, and you can see the smile, the feeling of that music. I'm talking about feeling the music, but we all have our own different ways. There can be connections in our brains between gesture and sound and the anatomy we need to create that sound. The theory is that we learned to sing before we learned to speak. When we were ancient beings, we would use melodic sounds to get meanings across. We'd be like, ah! I bet you knew exactly what that meant. Oh no, there's danger up there. Melodies needed to elicit an emotional response in other ancient humans in order to get them to respond appropriately. Oh no, I'm going to run away from that danger. But also, we did have use of our limbs, so we might be going. However, you might not be a gesture person. You might just feel the music in your body. You might be someone who has a lot of visual imagery and you need that visual imagery. You might be someone who needs the idea of colours. So this song feels like a deep burgundy to me with purples oozing out of it. You can just hear those voices coming in now. Ooh. That dissonance and resolve again. Oh, she's having a little nap. The bass in this is so important. It really grounds it into the world. But also what's really important is those clashy little harmonies. You want those bits where you go, oh, because it feels oh so good when you're like, ah. It's a life lesson, right? You can't have the good without a little bit of disharmony sometimes. In fact, I kind of love the feeling of being in those moments of disharmony when you need to work it out. It kind of is a metaphor to me of those moments where you're like, oh, I don't know what's going on in life. It is that creative moment before you, okay, we found balance again, and then we're back to crunchy, crunchy, crunch. I feel like that's a wonderful part of life, and I think it is the way that it slowly unfolds as well, and that meditative drone, it allows your brain to get into that state where you're able to think beyond your day-to-day life.